Good evening. Welcome to PoliticIt podcast. Tonight we have Trent Christensen, and you're running for Attorney General.
Yeah, State Attorney General. That's right. That's right.
Very good. So, just so our audience gets to know you, I know, you haven't been out there as much as some of the others, but
Sure.
tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And thank you for having us, and thank you for doing this service for the community. So, Trent Christensen, running for State Attorney General. Grew up in Utah, in Salt Lake County. When I came home from my mission, I went to BYU, and then I went to BYU Law School, graduated magna cum laude, went back east, practiced law for a number of years.
So what kind of law were you doing
it was
at that time?
It was complex business litigation. A lot of it was representing companies that were being sued by the federal government or individuals. And then I did a lot of appellate work as well, filed a lot of briefs in front of district courts, appellate courts, a few in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, and came back to Utah. And I have since then actually taken a turn in my career, and I've run a company. I've been a CEO and I'm currently general counsel for a tech firm.
Oh.
And I mentioned that.
So what was the company?
The company that I ran?
Yeah.
It's called venturecapital.org. It was a venture accelerator. We helped young entrepreneurs. We'd bring them in, we'd mentor them, we'd help them get their pitch deck ready, and then we'd help them make connections with investors, help them raise a seed round. Sometimes we'd do a Series A, maybe a Series B, but it was usually a seed round of funding for these investors, and help them do it in a way where the Division of Securities wasn't coming and asking them how they did it, because a lot of entrepreneurs that are new don't know don't know the rules and that sort of thing. So really enjoyed that. It was a nonprofit, and in the time I was there, we quadrupled resources, quadrupled income, revenue. We started a couple of new programs. We had programs that specifically helped women, minority, and veteran entrepreneurs as well. They face some different circumstances than your kind of run-of-the-mill entrepreneur. And right now I'm general counsel, so that's the top legal officer for a tech firm. It's called Omnitech, with a Q at the end, Omnitech. Oh. We do predictive AI. And we work with the military, with the defense contractors. We have a lot of clients in energy and commercial real estate and that sort of thing. So,
I used to own an AI company.
Did you?
Yeah, it's called Financial Neural Computing, FNC.
Okay.
And,
okay.
We built systems for the real estate industry,
Yeah.
really the mortgage industry.
Okay.
We automated the appraisal process.
Right. And that's a lot of what you get with AI.
Stuff.
The automation, the data analytics, the machine learning. Right. It's interesting, but it's also a little terrifying what AI can do. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I mention that because, the Attorney General is in charge of an office of 600 people, right? And 300 of them are attorneys.
Yeah, people don't realize how big that
It's big,
is.
Right. And, attorneys aren't always the easiest people to deal with. And so someone that has leadership experience, I think, is going to be critical in this race. You have to be a litigator. You have to understand how litigators work, how the process works. You have to have spent time in court. But I think you also need that leadership experience to come in and be able to really implement a vision in the office.
That's cool. So tell me, what are some of the other things you did in your past that will help you with this job?
Well, first of all, I've been a dad. And I've got my kids here. Thank you for letting me bring my kids in. That matters for a very particular reason. And it doesn't necessarily set me apart. The other candidates have kids too, but I mention it for a very specific reason. I'm running because my kids live in this state, and they're going to keep living in this state. And hopefully I'll have grandkids in this state. And there has to be somebody in the Attorney General's office that can be a check against the other powers of government, so that we can have a state that my kids are going to want to stay in when they're my age, right? In a couple of different ways, and we can have the conversation. I see Utah as California 20 years ago. And there has to be somebody in the Attorney General's office that I think can really direct a vision and keep the state with those conservative values that I grew up with, and I want the state to maintain. So that's one of the things. My mission, we talked about that, the things you learn on your mission, hard work, and that sort of thing. But I come a lot back to...
You still speak Spanish?
See, my mom is from Argentina.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, when I don't speak Spanish, she gets upset with me. So I have reason to practice it. Let me tell you about, just to answer your question, the first case I ever took to trial, I should say. I was a first-year attorney, brand new, and as I've mentioned, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. My bishop came to me and said, hey, there's a couple I need you to talk to. Will you help them? And they came and they told me a story. The state, and this is in Massachusetts, but they have a division of Child and Family Services like we do. The state had come to their home and by gunpoint had removed their two daughters from the house, 9 and 11, and were trying to terminate their parental rights based off of an allegation made by a former disgruntled employee. So I looked at it and I found, the accusations were completely baseless. I said, I'll take your case. So we go to trial. Remember, I'm a first-year attorney, right? The state comes in and they go like this, and they kind of toss a motion at me across the table, and it was a 24-page motion for sanctions against me against the attorney. And what they were doing is they were trying to scare me. They were trying to tell me, it's a brushback pitch. Get away from this kid. You know, you don't belong here. And I fought the motion. I won the motion. I won the hearing, but it took me 8 months to get those kids back to their parents and to protect their parental rights. And I bring that up because everybody knows the Attorney General is the state's chief law enforcement officer, right?
Right.
But it's a nuance and it's an important mindset to understand that even though you're the state's chief law enforcement officer, you're not the state's attorney. You're the people's attorney against the power of the state. And that's a huge difference because there's going to be times where people need to know that the state attorney general is their attorney even against the power of the attorney general's office. When the attorney general's office needs to be checked and made sure that they're following and protecting people's individual rights, they need to know that the attorney general is going to protect their rights, not just the agenda of the state. So I bring that case up specifically because, as I said, I was a first-year attorney. That really set the tone for how I wanted to practice law.
I don't think people understand that. So explain that office a little bit so people can better understand.
Yeah. The state attorney general is one of the most important offices in the state because it is the most powerful check against the other branches and officers of government that citizens have. The most important one. Now, the legislature and the governor can check each other, right? That's right. In the Constitution. The judiciary can check them, right? But the most powerful one is the state attorney general. The SG can check the power of the governor, can check the power of the legislature, can check even the power of the judiciary. But even more than that, the state attorney general sits at the top of and oversees every regulatory agency in the state as well, right? So you just take them off. DCFS, Division of Securities, Department of Commerce. The state attorney general has the ability to oversee every regulatory agency. And so, you know, if the individuals need someone to protect their rights and need it done immediately, that's the state attorney general. One of my top issues, and just to make the point, one of my top issues is election integrity. One of the things I want to do right off the bat is begin a full statewide transparent audit of Utah's electoral system. And people have said to me, Trent, okay, that's fine, but isn't the lieutenant governor over elections? And the answer to that is yes, she is, Deidre Henderson. But that doesn't mean that I need to ask her permission in order to run that investigation, because an attorney general can just run it, right? They don't need to have permission. They don't need to get a legislative, resolution passed. They can just do it. They have 300 attorneys and they can wake up one day and say, we're going to war and this is the fight we're going to fight. And, if a governor's action needs to be stopped, they don't have to go to committee. They don't have to go to court. They can just stop it with an injunction, right? So there's a lot of powers that an attorney general has that makes that office unique, but not just within a state. Because the attorney general can also check the power of the federal government, and you're seeing that a lot with state attorneys general.
Well, in fact, we had a case, a bill that we passed, a resolution to actually do that very thing.
Yeah.
We're gonna take a break.
Please.
Welcome back to PoliticIt. Now we have Trent Christensen, candidate for Attorney General.
That's right.
And so we were talking about this resolution that we ran this year.
Yeah.
That basically says that if the speaker and the president or the governor decides that a particular regulation that's coming down from the federal government is unconstitutional, we can call ourselves into session and basically look at that rule.
Yeah.
Mandate or whatever it is, right? And if we determine that it's not constitutional, then what we'll do is we'll basically inform the state agencies that they're not supposed to enforce it.
And they're absolved from any actions that the federal government might take to make them do it. And I love that so much because it's a good example of where, so previously I talked about how the attorney general can check the power of the legislature, but what a beautiful example of when the attorney general's office and the legislature would work in tandem, hand in hand. Because the beauty of it is, let's say we want to enforce our 10th Amendment rights. Federal government sends something down, okay? The attorney general can stop it immediately. Can just issue an injunction and tell the agencies don't follow that. But what makes it stronger is when the legislature steps in and does what you're saying. And the legislature comes in and says, as the voice of the people, okay, we're going to do this. They call themselves into session. The only difference is it just takes a little more time because you have to call yourself into session and then have the debate and then pass the resolution. But it's an even more powerful check against the federal government when we're working in tandem as partners, right? And I would assume that at some level there would be involvement from the attorney general to come in and say, yeah, here's a legal advice or an advisory opinion, right? All the reasons why it's unconstitutional. We work together. Obviously, the legislature has their own attorneys, and we could work in tandem on that, right? But it becomes something much more powerful. And then, of course, I'm sure there'd be a lot of instances where the governor would get involved and say, yeah, absolutely. You've got all of those branches of government, those officers of government saying, this is how Utah's going to do it, right?
Yeah, and I think for people in Utah, that's a really important thing because, one, the federal lands. I mean,
Right.
you think about how much of the state's controlled by the federal government.
Yeah.
That's always been an issue.
Right.
The legislature's actually spent quite a bit of money putting together a case, right? But the Attorney General really hasn't taken the initiative to push it forward.
So there are currently, Senator, 60 cases in federal court right now that involve rural Utah. And the next Attorney General has to be able to, and willing and capable of stepping in and putting their A game on every single one of those 60 cases. And that's just for right now. There will likely be more. I mean, we're talking about grazing rights. We're talking about access to public lands, right? We're talking about what people in southern Utah will refer to as dirt tourism, right? Moab and the national parks. And those kind of resources can bring more revenue into this state than even skiing, right? And so there's a case in Uinta right now where there's an argument over who has water rights in Uinta. And if the state loses that, it changes life along the Wasatch Front. So just because a case isn't happening along the Wasatch Front doesn't mean it's not important. It's critically important to our state, but that's the partnership, right? That's what the Attorney General and the state legislature can do together to protect and be proactive against what we know the federal government's going to do.
Following this Chevron case?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. So I've been following it for decades. This is an example of what just happened with Roe v. Wade. That didn't just happen. That was a strategy that was happening over decades. And the attorneys, the conservative attorneys, waiting for the right court, right? You have to have the right mixture on the Supreme Court. It's got to be, now it's 6-3. Well, the liberals have wanted Chevron in place. They've wanted that cemented in stone, right? And if Chevron gets overturned, right, the ability of the states to pull back power from the federal government, they'll be able to do it in a way you haven't seen in 40 years. And it doesn't just stop at the federal government. If Chevron, and just for the listeners that may not know, there's a case called Chevron, and it means that the federal government has told the judiciary that you have to give deference to what an administrative agency says. So if a court case comes before a judge, the judge has to stop and say, well, what did the administrative court say? Okay, I'm going to give deference to them. I'm just going to assume they're right. And I'm oversimplifying it, but that's what they're saying. It gives massive power.
They're the experts.
Exactly. We'll just defer to the administrative agency because Congress defers already.
This is an interesting case too because this is a fisheries case, right?
Yeah.
Where they were putting people on a boat, and
that's right.
And so the regulator comes on the boat.
Yep.
The company needs to pay for their food. They need to pay for their room, and now the government's decided that they should also pay their salary.
That's right.
And it ends up it's like 50% of their profit.
Right.
I don't know the exact number.
No, there were companies, small businesses. These are small businesses, right? These fishermen that were going out of business because they essentially had to hire a regulator that the government's making them pay for, and they didn't have the money for it. And so that's exactly right. Your analysis is exactly right.
Perfect case.
It's a perfect case. And you take it to the court. The court's 6-3 conservative, and if they overturn it, that's going to have ripples not just through the federal government, but it affects what states can do with their administrative agencies, right? If we say, hey, we don't want to have deference towards what an administrative court says, because every agency has administrative courts within them that act is basically their own fiefdom, right? And it's judge and jury and executioner all within the administrative state. And sometimes the courts don't even get a say, or the legislature doesn't get a say. And if that's what happens at the federal level, it'll trickle down and we'll be able to say, hey, actually, we want the state court system to decide these, and you no longer have to give deference to what the administrative agencies say. It's a huge case.
Right. Well, that's cool. So we're almost out of time.
Sure.
So I want you to make a pitch.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you say to the public when you appear at a meeting and say, I'm running for attorney general? I mean, what's your pitch?
Yeah. So I got into this race last October is when I finally I said, okay, absolutely, I'm in. And the reason was last October, there was an article that ran that there was a member of the legislature that proposed the idea of making the attorney general an appointed position under the governor. And the governor spoke in favor of it. And it was right then. It was right then in that moment that I knew, no, we need an attorney general that can not only fight that and keep that from happening, but can fight against the agenda of what's going to happen over the next 4 years. Because again, and I'll say it again, that is the single most important chess piece you have on the board is the attorney general. I mean, think of it as, it's not the queen, but it's probably the knight, right? That is a powerful piece. And to take it off the board and give it to your opponent is unconscionable.
We just had General Paxton here.
Oh yeah, that's
Texas.
right. I love Ken.
And when he was fascinating.
Yeah.
And actually he's done a lot of this.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the power of an attorney general, is they can protect your individual rights against what's happening at the state level, against what's happening at the county level, but also what's happening at the federal level. And that's what makes them so powerful, is they can attack and protect your rights at any level. And I'll just tell you a quick story to wrap up. When I was trying to decide whether to do this, the chairman of the board of my company, his name's General Lance W. Lord. He's a retired former 4-star general, and he was the first commander of the U.S. Space Command. And I was trying to explain to him why I wanted to get the position and all these things. And he said, Trent, stop. He said, look, you prepare for war, but you don't know when the war is coming. And when it comes, you fight it and you win. And then you come home. And that's what I want you to do. If this is your fight, you go fight it. And then you come home. You'll always have a place here with us. But if this is your fight, you go and you win. Because he understood when war comes, you got to go fight it. And this is the time that we need someone strong in that office that can stand up to whatever agenda is coming from the federal government, from the state government, from any government, and protect individual rights.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christensen.
Appreciate it.
Candidate for Attorney General.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Really
Nice
appreciate your
to have
time.
you.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.